Hello, my name is Caleb Burnett, and today I'm going to tell you a story. This won't be like any type of story. It won't be an old-fashioned story or a new-fashioned story. It's a timeless story. It's the story about two cats becoming friends. Our story takes place in Catville, a place full of cats, as you may have guessed. They were cats of all colors and sizes, from kids to adults to young to old. Catville was a place of harmony, and nobody ever got into fights there. Well, except for a few, because, there has to be some aggressive people out there. Anyway, but our story takes off with two cats. First, we'll talk about Phoebe Furball. Phoebe Furball was a black cat with yellow eyes and a pink nose. She was the daughter of Margaret Furball and Jeff Furball. She was very sweet and had a pretty profound heart in her. She practically carried her optimism, happiness, and joy everywhere she went. Our story takes off in Phoebe's house. It is the second week of school, and it's the last full week of August. Phoebe is currently sleeping in her bed. And then Phoebe Furball woke up, suddenly. Her eyes beamed open, and she was very happy that day. She woke up, stretched her arms, and realized that it was Monday. But that didn't bother her that much, because it was still the school day. Phoebe always loved school. She woke up and then looked out the window. She could see the sun shining and see all the nature of Catville blooming. It was now the last week of August and the second week of school. So basically it was like the final few school days in August. Then Phoebe said to herself, man, I can't wait for this day. Then she decided to get up and go to the bathroom. After she went to the bathroom, she headed downstairs. She quickly rushed into the kitchen, but not in a panicky way. And she grabbed out a box of cereal called Kitty Crunch. It was one of her favorite cereals of all time. It was a very fruit-flavored cereal, shaped in the form of cats. Phoebe got out a green bowl and decided to pour her cereal into that bowl. Then she went to the fridge and grabbed some milk. After the milk, she put it back and then decided to devour the meal. While Phoebe was chewing, her mother came in and said from across the hall, "Don't forget your lunch." And so Phoebe said to her mom, Margaret, "Don't worry, Mom, I won't forget." Then after she finished eating her breakfast, she went upstairs and decided to brush her teeth. After she brushed her teeth and rinsed her mouth and flossed and other dental hygiene things, she went back into her room just to grab her backpack. Then it was finally time to head out for the day. Phoebe came down with her red backpack on, and so Margaret and Jeff, Phoebe's mother and Phoebe's father was there, and they started to wish Phoebe a very good goodbye. Well said, Margaret. We'll miss you. We'll miss you too," said Jeff. Then Phoebe said in a very optimistic voice, "Don't worry, guys, I'll be back soon before you know it." One of Phoebe's parents were even crying at that point. Well, just a little bit. It's not overdramatic. Then, in a heart-touching moment, Phoebe decided to give them a hug, and so the two parents of Phoebe came in, and they all hugged together. They hugged themselves together for quite a few seconds, and then Phoebe decided to head off and go out the door. She opened the door real slowly and left it. She closed the door really softly. Then it was time for Phoebe to go off to the bus stop. She really liked August a lot, especially the end of August, since it was getting near the fall in Catville. And Phoebe absolutely loved warm weather. She then headed down the bus stop, a red stop sign which it was. Then she waited there patiently, and the bus would soon arrive about a few minutes later. While the bus was coming, out of nowhere, a white cat with green eyes and a pink nose named Snow came rushing out the door. She frantically closed the door and then rushed to the bus stop. She was kind of running a bit late. She hurriedly picked up her green backpack and put it on. She was probably gonna be late, but who can tell? Right before Phoebe was about to get on the bus, Snow also came on the bus. She said, "Whew, I made it." Meanwhile, everyone was giving her some hard looks, maybe even some sniggers, if you will. Snow soon became very nervous. She slowly walked up to the bus and saw a seat by herself. She picked in that seat and sat there. Then the bus drove off. Snow sat in utter silence, wondering what would happen to her. She was a new kid there. She had recently come from Catville City, a faraway place, and also a subdivision of Catville. As the bus drove on for several minutes, Phoebe decided to talk to Edward. Edward was an orange cat with blue eyes and a red bow tie. Phoebe and Edward talked for a little bit while the bus was going on. "So Phoebe, what did you do this weekend?" I'm honestly not sure, but I kind of forgot," said Phoebe. "But I did have a pretty nice relaxing weekend," said Phoebe. "What did you do too?" said Phoebe. "Well, as for me, as always," said Edward, "I love to read. I've been reading a lot of classic books lately." "Ooh, that sounds interesting." Meanwhile, Snow was still in utter silence. Then she whispered to herself, "I really don't belong here." Then the bus finally drove off and entered at Catville Elementary School. It was a place where all the kindergartners to 5th graders of cats would go to for their daily learning. Kindergarten was marked in pink rooms, 1st grade by red, 2nd grade by blue, 3rd grade by green, 4th grade by purple, and 5th grade by orange. Phoebe, Snow, and Edward were in 4th grade. And they had a teacher in room 408 called Miss Blank. She was a very nice teacher, and we'll get more into that a bit later, but for now. The bus came and parked near the school grounds. Then the bus doors opened, and soon all the kids, or cats if you will, started getting off the bus. Phoebe came off in relatively early, and so did Edward. Brittany, which we'll get into later, also came off. She was a pink cat with blue eyes and had a necklace. A silver necklace. A pearly necklace. Out of all the cats on the bus that came out, Snow was the last one to come up. She slowly walked towards Catville Elementary School, feeling utter shame in herself. She felt like she was a burden to the school. Then, Snow went to room 408, which was Miss Blank's classroom. And from there, Snow sat in her seat and didn't say anything. The cats spent a few minutes talking to each other. Class had almost started. Then class did start, and when it did start, Miss Blank came in and closed the door real softly. She then walked up to the room and said, "Hello, class. Welcome to the 2nd week of school. I'm Miss Blank, and I believe we have a new face here." Then she pointed to Snow. "Snow," she said, "would you like to introduce yourself?" And then Snow said sure. Snow said that very nervously, but she was still committed to showing herself out there to the world and to her classmates. Then Snow stood up and started saying things. Hello, my name is Snow Fluffers, and I am a new student here. Ooh, said Miss Blank. That sounds intriguing, she said. Now where were you from? She said. Snow answered from Capital City. And we've already talked about Capital City earlier, but to recap, Capital City is a big, larger place than Capital. It's full of business cats and stuff like that. We may or may not see much of Capital City later on in this film. Capital City, Miss Blank said. That's amazing. Now, what is your favorite food? Snow said spaghetti. Fun fact, Snow is actually an Italian key. Mamma mia. Miss Blank replied, I like spaghetti too. In fact, I like it with meatballs and with garlic bread. Those are always delicious. Wow, said Snow, I'm glad to hear. Yeah, I also enjoy it with meatballs and garlic bread. It's a delicious thing. Lastly, Miss Blank asked, what are some of your favorite hobbies? Snow answered, I like doing a lot of things, but specifically nature things, such as going outside, going on walks, taking pictures of animals and stuff like that. That's what I really enjoy doing most. Wow, said Miss Blank. And do you think that you would want to do this as a career later on? Snow said maybe, but after all, I'm only in 4th grade, so I still have plenty of time to think about it. Yes you do, said Miss Blank, yes you do. Alright Snow, thank you so much, and you can sit down now. And without further ado, Snow sat down. Then it was time for Miss Blank to get into the lecture. Alright everyone, she said. For our lesson today, we will be doing some mathematics. Edward was really happy about that, and so was Phoebe. Snow maybe a bit, but maybe just average. Miss Blank then wrote a few problems on the board. They were multiplication problems. Alright, class, Miss Blank said. Now we're going to be doing some multiplication problems. And I want you, this is a challenge, but I want you to try and do this using your own head. That sounded like a challenge for Snow. And so with the other cats. Now, Miss Blank said, who can solve this first one? 10 times 7. This one was actually very easy at Edward. Edward blurted out 70, but he did raise his hand beforehand. Great, said Miss Blank. I'll give you an A+. Miss Blank felt happy about that. Miss Blank always gives A+ to those who participate in class. Then the next problem was 12 times 6, and then Phoebe raised her hand and said 72. And Phoebe was correct, and so she got A+ and a point. Miss Blank also liked to give points out to those who participated. When somebody participated in Miss Blank's class, they would get a point, and once they reached a certain amount of points, they would receive a gift, or a surprise. Then it came to the last equation. The last equation was 6 times 9. Then Snow raised her hand nervously, and Miss Blank called on her. Snow said 54. She said it quite a bit nervously, but she still got correct. Congratulations, Snow. A+, and the first point that you've ever gotten in this class. Snow felt really happy, and kinda almost blushed at that moment. She was a little bit embarrassed that she actually got the answer right. Some people would have even doubted her to say that she would be all the way wrong. Then the lecture was about over. Don't worry, class, said Miss Blank. For those who didn't answer, that's okay, as we will do a bit more in the weeks to follow. The class then moved on to literature and reading, and then it was time for the lunch bell, and the lunch bell rang. Phoebe, Snow, and Edward got out, but Snow was unsure where to go, so she kinda seemed to follow Edward and Phoebe. Phoebe and Edward decided to go out to the park, or the playground that is, and so Snow did the same thing too. She sat alone by herself and ate her lunch, eating a cold sandwich, a turkey sandwich, on wheat bread. And the sandwich also had provolone cheese on it. Soon, Snow decided that she was actually going to try and talk to some people and develop some of her social skills so that way she wouldn't feel like a stranger to the class anymore. You know, she said, I think it's time for me to actually start getting some friends and to start talking to some people. So she finished her lunch quite quickly, about 5 minutes or so. Then she decided to go up and figure out how to make a friend. Since she already knew, she decided to test out with a few objects. First, she tried out to a bird. She said, "Will you be my friend?" But the bird flew away. Then she went up to a bee and said, "Would you be my friend?" But the bee flew away and also tried to sting her. Ouch. Lastly, Snow decided to talk to a rock and said to the rock, "Would you be my friend?" But the rock didn't say anything. Snow soon frowned. Then Snow was feeling very sad. "Man," she said, "I don't think I'm ever gonna get people like me here." That seemed to be the truth until Phoebe Furball came. She then tapped on Snow's shoulder and said, "Don't worry, I'll be your friend." But before that, Snow said, "Whoever it is, go away." But then Phoebe replied, "No, I'll be your friend." Then Snow slowly turned around and saw Phoebe. Snow was kinda sad at first, but she probably didn't know at that time that she was about to make a long-lasting friendship with someone she hadn't really met before. Not to even mention that she was also one of the answerers in Miss Blank's lecture. Then Snow said, "Do I know you?" And then Phoebe replied, "Yes, I do know you. My name is Phoebe Furball, and you must be Snow." Snow then lit up the room. She smiled. "Okay," said Snow, "now I do remember you." And so she did. "You're in Miss Blank's class," she said. "Yes, I am," said Phoebe. "And I can see that you're quite a bit lonely, so I wanted to offer a bit of support and help to you, and to make sure that you don't feel left out in this school. It can be a bit tough, especially when you're a new kid. I had a bit of hard times myself ever since I was a bit in kindergarten, but I soon grew and had friends, and I've now have a pretty profoundly successful career, and I'm actually quite popular in this school." Snow replied, "Wow, that's very amazing. I know someone can actually be that popular and get all this attention." Phoebe said, "Yeah, but you'll get there one day. You'll get there." Then Phoebe and Snow decide to talk about some of their favorite things, like their favorite food, which Phoebe's was steak. And Phoebe had lived in Capital all her life. She never really visited Capital City. She did a few times, but she was mostly living in Capital. Then Phoebe's hobbies were art, drawing, drama, and other things. She was also a polymath, and so is Edward himself too. Then Phoebe and Snow talked for quite a bit more. Then they decided to give each other a handshake. "Hey Phoebe," said Snow, "is it okay if I give you a handshake?" "Sure," said Phoebe, and so the two cats did a handshake. They were now officially in unity. Then they paused for a few seconds. Then Phoebe decided to introduce Snow to Edward. "Hey Phoebe," said Snow, "is it okay if I meet Edward?" "Sure," said Phoebe, "let's go meet Edward." And so they walked up to Edward. "Phoebe, this is Edward." Phoebe said, "Snow, this is Edward," and Edward, this is Snow. Edward said, "Hello." Snow and Edward decided to talk about the same things that Phoebe and Snow had been talking about, and also what she had shared with Miss Blank. She also made a compliment in saying, "I really like your bow tie." "Oh yes," said Edward, "I've had this since I was 4 years old. It served as a cherished item of mine." And so the three cats continued to talk to each other. Then the lunch bell rang and it was time for class to begin. Then Phoebe, Snow, and Edward decided to go off into the doors of the school and head back to room 408 or Miss Blank's classroom. But while they were doing that, out of nowhere, a pink cat with blue eyes and a pearl necklace, or a pearl bracelet, actually it's a pearl bracelet, named Brittany, came out of nowhere and decided to confront the three cats. "What do you want?" said Phoebe. "Oh, I just want to see what you're up to," said Brittany. Brittany was always a sarcastic jerk to Phoebe, Snow, and Edward. Then Brittany noticed something odd. Looks like you have a new face here," she said. "Yeah, and her name is Snow," said Phoebe. "I want you to back off and get away from her." Then Brittany even tried to physically hurt Snow, Phoebe, and Edward, but then she decided that she didn't want to because she knew that she would get in trouble with it. And she also was running late for class. And also, she didn't feel like it was the right time to sabotage the three cats. Then she walked off and stormed off. Then Phoebe, Snow, and Edward went back to class and decided to stay there for the rest of the time being. Then it was time for the end of the day, and so Miss Blank wished everyone a great afternoon. And they also didn't have homework, so that even made things much more of a breeze. Then Phoebe, Snow, and Edward waved to Miss Blank, and they walked out the door. Then Phoebe, Snow, and Edward got on the bus, and Phoebe and Snow sat next to each other, and Edward sat with another of his friends. Then the bus drove off, and after a few stops and several minutes, the bus finally came back, and Phoebe and Snow got off the bus. Edward had already been dropped off at a different neighborhood since he lived somewhere else in Capital. Phoebe and Snow walked together, and then they finally came to their houses. But before they did that, they decided to sing a song, and this was the song that they decided to sing.
"I was searching for a friend, but then I found you instead. I was lonely for a while, but then you made me smile. Never saw you before, just before I walked out the door. I can tell we can be friends of just you and me. We can do what we do to get anything through. Close your eyes and breathe. Your friends are just you and me. I can't wait to see just how this friendship can be. Don't have fear, don't feel drear. I can always feel you coming near. I'll be there on your side, so don't be afraid and don't hide. Just realize and see your friends are just you and me. We can do what we do to get anything through. Close your eyes and breathe. Your friends are just you and me. We can do what we do to get anything through. Close your eyes and breathe. Your friends are just you and me. Your friends are just you and me.
Afterwards, Phoebe and Snow decided to give each other not just a handshake, but also a hug. So they did a handshake, but afterwards they gave each other a big hug. And so Phoebe and Snow nearly got tears in their eyes, but they were of course being a little over dramatic, because that'd be weird. And so Snow went to her house and Phoebe walked off to hers. Phoebe closed the door to her house, and she was then confronted by her mom and dad, Margaret and Jeff. "Hello," said Margaret. "How are you doing?" "I'm doing good," said Phoebe. "What's for dinner tonight?" she said. "Ooh, well, for dinner tonight," said Margaret, "we're having spaghetti." Spaghetti," said Phoebe. "That's one of Snow's favorite meals." "Wait a minute, who's Snow?" said Margaret. "Are you sure this kid's not a bad one, or a gangster?" said Jeff. "Honey, stop that," said Margaret. Okay, I was joking, said Jeff. Jeff always liked to joke and tell funny things at the table and everywhere he went to. He was a jokester, and a good companion to Phoebe whenever she felt down. He would even support them with jokes if they were ever going through a tough time. Anyway, back to Phoebe. But Phoebe said, "No, Phoebe's not any of those things. Instead, she's kinda just like me." "Oh, really?" said Mom. "Yes," said Phoebe. "Basically, she's pretty nice, and she's very into nature." "Ooh," said Mom. "That would be very nice. You know, we haven't been in a nature walk in such a long time, and I think that'd be a great idea." "Yes, I think that'd be a great idea too, Mom," said Phoebe. "Well, I'll be in my room, and I'll be watching out from the window and playing with my toys." "Okay," said Margaret, "have fun." And so Phoebe walked off. She went inside her room and closed the door. She put her backpack down and decided to look out the window for a bit. While she was looking out the window, she saw a familiar face, and that was Snow. She was looking out the window too. Once Snow saw Phoebe, she decided to wave out the window, and so Phoebe did the same. And that's how Phoebe and Snow met each other, and that's how this brilliant friendship formed together. Sorry it took such a long time to go over that story, but that's just some information on how Phoebe and Snow started. Anyway, I suppose we better get back to the show, or the film that is. As you can see, I have some cars in place, and they're gonna guide us to Capville. A little bit of information about Capville is that Capville was founded on June 28, 1810, by Matthew D. Capville. He was a Capville pioneer and was one of the greatest founders of Capville. And he kind of was the only founder of Capville. Anyway, without further ado, let's start the movie and let's get this started. Alright, welcome to our first stop in Capville. So we finally entered Capville and we just passed the billboard sign saying welcome to Capville. Now these brown buildings right here are business buildings of Capville. Some of them include banks and making sure that everyone's doing safe. This is also where we can find things like the police, fire department, trash services, and countless other things. Feel free to look around. Anyway, now let's continue on to the next part. And this is where we'll continue our next stop of Capville. Before we jump into our story, of course. Alright, drivers, let's get this show on the road and let's keep moving. Right, now we're officially entering Catville Park. This is the biggest area in Catville. This is where a lot of nature lives. And where a lot of grass grows. There's a lot of flowers here, and all different types of trees. It's basically Catville's one-of-a-kind nature park, and one-of-a-kind nature exhibit for all. Anyway, and now we're officially entering Catville Park, and soon after we will be entering the Cat Street neighborhoods. Stay tuned, and let the vehicles carry us on. Alright, now we've made it to the Cat Street neighborhoods, and now Phoebe's house is gonna be somewhere on the very back or 4th Cat Street. So we'll go there and see what she's up to. Also as well, the drivers are now dismissed, and I'll take everything from here. So long, drivers. And let the picture continue. We're finally now in 4th Cat Street, and here we are at Phoebe and Snow's house. Phoebe's house will be on the right, and Snow's house will be on the left, but we'll focus on Phoebe's house for now. Phoebe's house is yellow, and Snow's house is green. The colors are not shown here, as we're still in the scale model of Catville. We'll go much more detail after this introduction. Anyway, but Phoebe's house is on the left. Actually, the right. Sorry, I messed up. And to recap, Snow's house is on the left. All the houses in Cat Street and the Cat Street neighborhoods, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Cat Street, are all covered by fences, meaning that no one can ever get in or get out. As in, they can't ever trespass, you know. Then that'd be breaking the law. But anyway, let's see at the top of Phoebe's house, and let's see what she's up to. We are currently at the top of Phoebe's house. Now this is the front view of the house, so basically Phoebe's bedroom is gonna be on this side, but on the back, so it's reversed. And this also goes with Margaret and Jeff's bedroom, as this will also be reversed, and theirs is 1 block over, so they're on the right side and Phoebe's on the left side of the house. Anyway, but this is the upstairs, and now without further ado, maybe let's go to the back stairs. Or downstairs, if you will. I got my language confused, and let's explore the rest of the house. Now we are currently downstairs, or the front of Phoebe's house. This is where we would spot the living room, a downstairs bathroom, and a kitchen. Also as well as a dining room too. They don't appear in this model since we are in a scale model version right now, but we'll see them much more later as the film goes on. But for now we have the front door, which is in the middle of this cube, which is Phoebe's house, and then we have 2 windows, one on the left side and one on the right side. And now let's go into Phoebe's house. Alright, now we're officially inside Phoebe's house. the left corner on the front is the living room, the opposite side or on the right corner of the front is the dining room, and then going up one, the right corner on the back is the entrance to outside, and the opposite of that, going left, is the kitchen. We'll get to this a bit later, but so far there's no graphics right now because we're still in a scale model of Catville. I decided to do this so I could have some simplicity. Anyway, but that's pretty much it inside, I mean. And without further ado, let's go outside. Now we're officially outside of Phoebe's house, and this is also the outside of the Cat Street neighborhoods. We've already seen the wonderful works that Phoebe's house bestows, and so far this completes our tour of Catville, but I do want to go back and go forward once again, so that way you have a good memory, and that way you have a good memorization of Catville in its whole. This isn't all of Catville, but this is the entrance of Catville, the point in which Catville begins, and when our story takes place. So now with all that said, let's go back, and let's go see the outside of all of Cat Street, and see it once in its glory. Now we're back in Cat Street neighborhoods. So as you can see, the front one is the fourth, and then the third, second, and first going onward. So this is Catville's most common place of residence. It contains quite a lot of houses, about 100 if you will. And Cat Street was also one of the first streets ever founded in Catville. So that's even an amazing fact. It would also be really good if you lived there. Well, if it existed in real life. Anyway, I decided to go back all the way to the beginning and have a quick refresher to see what Catville looks like. And here's a little bit of the walkthrough from Cat Street, all the way from the Cat Street neighborhoods, all the way to the Welcome to Catville sign. So we're gonna go back and visit there. And I want you to picture this in your head as we go along. Anyway, enjoy me for the ride, and pretty soon we might even spot the drivers that guide us in the beginning. and that was Catville going back. So we went all the way from 4th Cat Street, 3rd Cat Street, 2nd Cat Street, 1st Cat Street, practically all of the Cat Street neighborhoods, and went all the way back to our beginning. Basically, here's how the sequence went. We started off at the very edge of Cat Street neighborhoods. So we went to the Cat Street neighborhoods, then to Catville Park, and then passed by the Catville Business Revenue, or the business part of Catville, called Catville Business Institute, and then we made it back to where we came from, with the welcome to Catville sign being just not far away from there, and as well crossing through many grassy fields. Anyway, so now we know for sure what Catville looks like from backwards, and I hope you now have it memorized in your head of what this wonderful world looks like. We are still in a scale model, but after we go with Catville one more time, we will soon be entering full detail here. So bear with me. Anyway, there's still about a few more things to go through. But nonetheless, I hope you enjoyed it so far. And now without further ado, let's go back to Catville and go to 4th Cat Street and go up at Phoebe's house. So now we're finally back in the Cat Street neighborhoods. So we have 1st Cat Street up front, then 2nd Cat Street, 3rd Cat Street, and 4th Cat Street. Now we're gonna go back to 4th Cat Street to check up on Phoebe. She should be awake by now. And Phoebe's house is right in the middle, and we can also view some of the other houses in Billy. But for now, let's go with Phoebe's house and see what she's up to. Oh yeah, and before we do that, I hope you now remember the layout of Catville. So that was Catville going forward for a second time. So remember, we have some grassy fields and the highway right before the Welcome to Catville sign. Then we have Catville's business residence. Then we have Catville Park, the finest of all nature, and the Catville Business Institute, or division, if you will. Something along the lines of Business Catville. So Catville Business. So Catville Business billings also includes a bank, a police station, a fire station, and as well as trash agencies. They make sure that Catville stays clean and safe. As well, they also work really well off of one another, making sure that Catville stays safe, which it mostly does, but every now and then there can always be someone lurking out, seeking to do bad in the world. And then Catville Nature Park, which was right before the Cat Street neighborhoods, contains a lot of scenery and tons of grassy miles and yards. For all cats, all ages, and all sizes and shapes. Maybe not so much with shapes, but also with all colors, are allowed to be there anytime they want. And now I think I've had enough talking, So without further ado, let's get back into Phoebe's house. And let's cut back into Phoebe's house, which we're going to do as we make a detour from first Cat Street to second Cat Street to third Cat Street, all the way to fourth Cat Street. So come on, join in. Okay, so now we're officially back at the front of Phoebe's house. Now let's have a quick recap of what is inside. Inside we have, well, in the basement, or, well, in the first floor, we have the living room, which is on the right-left corner. Actually, that is on the right corner of the front of the house, and the living room is on the left corner of the front of the house. On the back room of the left corner of the house is the kitchen, and on the right corner of the back of the house, that will be the entrance outside. Now on the top, we'll get to that a bit later. Anyway, actually we'll get into it now. At the top, on the right side of the front of the house, on the second floor, we have Margaret and Jeff's, or Phoebe's mom and dad's bedroom. And on the opposite side of that, going to the left corner on the front of the house on the second floor, that would be Phoebe's room. And go in, and we haven't really gone to the back. On the left corner of the back of the second floor is a bathroom, and also entrance into an attic. And the right corner of the back of the house on the second floor is the laundry room. So we'll get into that a bit later. But now let's continue our tour, and we will soon be over. We're officially now back at Phoebe's house, and the front of the house. The center is supposed to be the door, and on the left and right side windows. Now let's go back up to Phoebe's bedroom, which will be on the upper floor, or the second floor, and it's on the left front corner of Phoebe's house. So we're gonna go there, and then we'll do our final shot of the scale model, and then we'll do an epilogue. So we'll do an epilogue, and then we will officially be done. But now let's get back to Phoebe's house. Alright, we've now made it back to Phoebe's bedroom, or the outside of it, and thus we have officially ended, or at least we have finally finished the paralogue to this movie. I know it was quite a lot, but there's just so many profound things I just want to get over. I'm glad that you were able to enjoy, or at least listen to the origin story of Phoebe and Snow, learn more about Catville and its roots, have a general outlook of Catville, and for exploring this wonderful world with me. After all, I did create the world of Caleb Burnett himself. Well, myself, I did. Anyway, so now let's officially start a new story, and now we're officially going to get into the real story of Phoebe and Snow. This story about Phoebe and Snow focuses on attempts to sabotage their friendship. But with the help of Phoebe, Snow, Edward, and sometimes even Brittany, they face the odds of what's going to happen next. Outline of the film, but I won't try to give any spoilers. Anyway, but now is the time we will finally exit out the scale model And we will finally get to see Phoebe, Snow, Brittany, Edward, Miss Blank, Margaret, and Jeff, or Phoebe's parents, if you will, finally in full color. And we'll finally get to witness this moment. We've already gone over their friendship and their origin story. And now, with all that being said and done, let's exit out of the scale model, make the screen turn white, and let us start the new story of Phoebe and Snow. Alright, so now we're on a blank white screen, and this is where our story officially begins. Nothing has happened quite yet, but now we'll like to introduce the characters. First up we have Phoebe Furball. She is a black cat with yellow eyes and a pink nose. She's in 4th grade and is about 9 to 10 years old. Her strengths are that she is pretty kind, supportive, helpful, smart, a good listener, and quite a few other things. Her weaknesses are she can be overly trusting, being unable to respond to complicated situations, and being extremely sensitive. And she's also an autistic cat like Caleb Burnett is, which I am too. Anyway, that's a basic introduction of Phoebe Furball, and also as well some additional information. She holds a record in Cabell Elementary School for being the most involved. She also has perfect attendance in kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, and possibly even 4th grade. We'll see if she even makes it for a 5th year in a row. Who knows, but keep it up, Phoebe. Now, without further ado, please welcome Phoebe Furball. Come on, Phoebe, get out here. Hi, Phoebe. How you think you're doing? Good, Phoebe says. That sounds pretty good, Phoebe. Now you're ready for the story? Yes, I am, said Phoebe. Alright, now let us introduce the other characters. On the list is Snow Fluffers. She is a white cat with green eyes and a pink nose, since all the cats have pink noses. She lives in a house right next to Phoebe's, and they're also neighbors. They've been doing that ever since Snow moved in the weekend before Phoebe and Snow actually met. Some of Snow's strengths is that she's emotionally intelligent, she's pretty good with nature, and she mostly stays calm in difficult situations. However, some of her weaknesses include that she's incredibly shy. She can be incredibly nervous and anxious about anything really, and she's also kind of sensitive just like Phoebe is. Snow does not have autism spectrum disorder the way that Phoebe does. However, she does have celiac disease, so Snow does have something a bit charming to her. And this is based off of Caleb Burnett's own experience, since he himself and I myself have celiac disease. Other than that, she's also quite a bit involved in her old school, which was Cabell City Elementary School. She's not as much involved. She wasn't as much involved in the way Phoebe was, but she was highly involved. She did nature clubs, hiking clubs, and other things too, and just to name a few. She also won a conservation award, and she also loves taking pictures of nature. Some of her favorite animals include butterflies, caterpillars, worms, and countless other things, so she's practically a nature lover. Anyway, I think that's practically all the information I wanted to say about Snow Fluffers. So now, without further ado, please welcome Snow Fluffers. And Snow Fluffers is Phoebe's best friend. Sorry about that, I had to have that at the last minute. So now, let us introduce Snow Fluffers. Here comes Snow. Hello, Snow. Hi, Caleb, said Snow. So, are you ready for the story? Yes, I am, said Snow. I can sense that. Well, we have about a few more minutes, and we also have quite a few characters left to go over. Anyway, so we have 5 main characters left to go out of the 7 in the series and the film. So, hang on tight, Snow. Okay, said Snow. Alright, see you later, Snow. Bye. Anyway, now our third character that I want to talk about, and the third main character, and the last of the trio of Phoebe Snow. Phoebe and Snow is Edward. His full name is Edward James Tabby, and Phoebe's full name is Phoebe Scarlett Furball, and for Snow's it's Snow Whitney Fluffers. Edward is an orange cat with blue eyes and a red bow tie. Fun fact, he's actually been wearing that red bow tie for quite many years, well, ever since he was 4. Anyway, Phoebe, Snow, and Edward are approximately 9 to 10 years old. Edward is also incredibly smart, and he's also polymath just like Phoebe Furball is. He's mostly into art, he's mostly into scientific fields and academia, rather than Phoebe, who's into art, but Edward still has a like for art, although his main focus is just academia and academic subjects. In his room, he has lots of educational references. Even his bookshelf is mostly filled with classic works, and also with textbooks. However, there are at least a few books that he enjoys too. Some of them include textbooks on chemistry, biology, astronomy, astrophysics, mathematics, algebra, algebra 1, algebra 2, geometry, trigonometry, calculus, precalculus, and countless others. I won't go into full detail of them there, but that's just to name a few of the books that he has. He's also a big academic lover, kind of like how Phoebe is. However, Edward's on a more profound level than Phoebe is. He is also the oldest of the trio of Phoebe, Snow, and Edward. He was born on December 12, 1980, and Phoebe Furball on January 17, 1981, and Snow on July 4, 1981. So that means this story takes place about the 1990s, either 1990 or 1991, but he would be at least 9 to 10 years old in the time that the story takes place. Some of Edward's strengths include his super intelligence, his emotional intelligence, mostly relating to his intelligence, but he's also good at problem solving, and other things too. Some of his weaknesses, though, are over-reliance on himself, meaning that he almost always wants to rely on himself, so he has a bit of trouble trying to work in group projects, since Edward wants to contribute a profound amount, but sometimes he accidentally gets left out or intentionally left out. Since some cats in his school just don't know what to do with him. Thankfully, he does have a few supportive friends other than Phoebe and Snow that actually nurture his talents. Phoebe and Snow do, but there are also these 2 cats named Sizz and Fizz. They're also Edward's friends, and more of his mutual friends. And practically Phoebe, Snow, Sizz, and Fizz are all 4 of Edward's mutual friends that we know of. Sizz is a green cat, is a blue cat. Together, Edward, Fizz, and Sizz work together on their schoolwork, and also with Phoebe and Snow. Phoebe and Snow also have a relationship with Sizz and Fizz, but it's not as strong as it is with Edward. All 5 of them like academia a lot, and each of the 5 of them have their different strengths. Edward is practically everything. Phoebe in mathematics, Snow in English. Edward, well, we've already talked about Edward, he's practically everything. Sizz in science, and Fizz in history. So they all have their different strengths and purposes. Anyway, we could talk more about Edward, Phoebe, Snow, and all that later on in the film. But for now, I think we've had enough introductions just for Edward alone. So now, without further ado, please welcome Edward James Tabby, or Edward. Come on up, Edward. Don't be shy. Everyone's been waiting for you. Edward, how are you feeling about the show? I'm feeling pretty good, said Edward. That sounds pretty good. And your bow tie's keeping up as usual? Yes, it is. Always is, huh? Thank you, Edward. You'll play a much more important part of the story, since you, of course, are one of Phoebe's friends, and also Snow's friends. You must have a lot of friends overall, and that must be good for you. Anyway, we'll see you later, Edward. Now, our next character is a lot more complicated. She is a pink cat with blue eyes, and she wears a pearl necklace, and she wears a pearl bracelet. Her name is Brittany Buttercup, or for her full name, Brittany Rose Buttercup. She's mostly an antagonist to Phoebe, Snow, and Edward, practically an antagonist for anyone. She's practically the main villain of the story. Anyway, she's known for being repulsive. However, she is very into fashion. Her strengths include being interested in fashion, and she can be kind of nice to some of her friends. But even when she's trying to be nice, she mostly backfires it. So she practically has a lot of weaknesses, and those are just being mean to everyone, and she's also a bit aggressive. This is also true especially of Phoebe, as Brittany doesn't like Phoebe that much because of her extreme popularity and the fact that everybody literally likes her. So she always gets jealous and shows resentment towards that. She even has a few friends, but they're not really good friends at all. She also has a sidekick named Lily, but even then, Lily feels mostly left out, and she doesn't really feel anything. What I'm trying to say is, Lily and Brittany do not have a good relationship at all. They actually have much more of a toxic relationship, so everything's all rocky in a road for Brittany and Lily. And also for the other classmates. She's practically the intimidator. She can be quite scary to deal with sometimes. It's quite evident that she practically is. Her parents have quite a lot of money, but she isn't super rich and doesn't really live in a mansion. Maybe she does, but that will be one day though. She mostly lives in a upper class house, one of the biggest houses in the neighborhoods. She lives far away from Cat Street, and unlike Phoebe, Snow, and Edward, which they all live on 4th Cat Street, but in different houses, Phoebe and Snow are next to each other, while Edward is about 5 houses away. She mostly represents all the negativity in the world, while in my opinion she does. She always tries to do good, but that's always overshadowed by most of her evil deeds. Anyway, I think that's enough chilling talk about her, so now without further ado, let's introduce Brittany. Hi Brittany, how are you doing? Doing well, said Brittany. Yeah, I can tell you're being sarcastic. Nah, good, Anyway, alright, I'll stop talking to you. Alright, bye. Now we've gone over the sarcastic Brittany that she always is, let's move on to our 5th character, and that practically wraps up the end of the adolescent characters. Now we're officially in the adult characters. The first adult character on this list is Miss Blank. Her full name is Abby Delilah Blank, and she was born on May 18th, 1978. Well, that's, I believe, her estimated birthday. I'll have to go check on that again. Anyway, and Brittany's birthday is October 16th, 1980, making her the oldest of the young cat characters. So basically goes Brittany, Edward, Phoebe, and Snow in terms of their age, from oldest to youngest. Anyway, for Miss Blank on the other hand, she's a nice and warm teacher, a complete opposite and a step up from what Brittany was. She's a lot more nicer and warm-hearted. She always pours in her best when it comes to her learning and her teaching. She's been teaching for over 10 years at Capital Elementary School. She's spent a few times. She basically went kindergarten for 2 years, 1st grade for 3 years, 2nd grade for 2 years, 3rd grade for 2 years, and now she'll be teaching 4th grade for who knows how long. It is now her second year teaching at Capital Elementary School and in the 4th grade section. She overall thinks that Capital Elementary School is a very great place. It's pretty positive, colorful, and a lot of inspiration for Phoebe and to herself. Phoebe is also one of Miss Blink's students. They both have jaunty and chirpy attitudes that make them really stand out from anyone else in the school. Miss Blank also loves extracurricular activities and is practically involved in almost anything that she can get her hands on. From art clubs to theater clubs to dance clubs, she's practically into everything, and Miss Blank herself is most likely a polymath. It's never officially confirmed, but she's definitely most likely a polymath, similar to Phoebe and Edward. She's also profoundly understanding and profoundly positive in every sense of the word. Some of her strengths include she's pretty nice and supportive of her students, and she's practically engaged in almost anything, although she chooses to disengage if a topic seems inappropriate. So she's mostly like Phoebe in a sense of the word. However, Miss Blank herself does not have autism, but she does have a sincere heart, and she is quite sensitive, so she's practically almost like Phoebe, except for her autistic part. So, she's practically one of those characters that is almost like a personality doppelganger to Phoebe. On the other hand, some of her weaknesses include she can be a bit disorganized, even though and of course she still messes up and still makes mistakes, and that's what makes her a cat. Because cats make mistakes, like humans do. As well, she can also kind of be sortly emotionally unstable. She can kinda unfortunately cause a few meltdowns here and there. But that's mostly whenever she's having a bad day. But she rarely ever does that. There were actually very few days, if not any at all, in which Miss Blank acted like this. She's practically almost keeps her cool, but of course, she knows when she's being pushed to her limits. She's also supportive of everyone around her. She's practically like Phoebe in every sense of the word, and a near personality doppelganger like her. So now, without further ado, please welcome Miss Blank, Phoebe, Snow, Edward, and Brittany's 4th grade teacher from Capital Elementary School. Here comes Miss Blank right now. Hello, Miss Blank, how are you doing? Pretty good, she says. Are all the students acting pretty good? Yeah, they are, said Miss Blank. That sounds pretty good. I hope you have a really good day, and I'll see you in the future. Alright, bye, Miss Blank. Yeah, you too. So now we've gone over the residents or the citizens of Capital Elementary School, but now we're going to focus on a specific character named Phoebe Furball. And now we're going to focus on her parents. So first we have Phoebe's mom, or Margaret. Her full name is Margaret Elizabeth Furball. She is primarily known for being the mother of Phoebe Furball. She's practically their only daughter so far. Phoebe and the Furball family does have other relatives, but if we're just focusing on the Furball family in Capital, then basically there's only 3 members: Jeff, Margaret, and Phoebe herself. So now let's go a little bit into Margaret. Margaret was born on August 7th, 1954. She is about 36 years old, which was quite a bit average for a 10-year-old or a 9-year-old, since the average age for an adult to have a kid is roughly about 25, 26, maybe even 27. That's like the average. And so that's also the average in Capital, and Capital is also a bit modeled off of the human world too. Margaret loves to do a lot of things, but her main job is reading. She works at the Capital Children's Library, and from there, she loves reading stories to little kids. She always seems to inspire them wherever they go. Margaret is also reliable, but can also be an overworried or overworked mom towards Phoebe. She tries her very best to make sure that Phoebe is safe, and also make sure that she has friends and that she's loved by all. She basically serves as one of the most important characters in Phoebe Furball's life, and practically to the entire film. Some of Margaret's favorite things to do include reading, cooking, gardening, and countless other things, just to name a few. Phoebe's mom, however, Margaret, is definitely not a polymath. While she does enjoy a lot of things, she isn't a polymath in the sense that Phoebe is. However, she does absolutely support Phoebe every step of the way. She even supports Phoebe whenever she shows a new art piece that she creates, or even a new book that Phoebe writes. Margaret is a little bit creative, but not as creative as Phoebe is. Phoebe is generally the more profoundly creative of the Furball family, with Jeff being Margaret being moderately to highly, but Phoebe definitely being profoundly. Margaret is also married to Jeff Furball, which we'll get into quite a bit shortly. Margaret also checks in on Phoebe constantly, making sure that she's okay. But now that Phoebe is around 10 years old and is now in the 4th grade, Phoebe starts learning to take care of herself and taking things in her own hands when it comes to her health. Margaret is not rude at all. She can be a little bit stressed or annoyed when things don't go her way. Her strengths are that she's kind, supportive, and is pretty good at cooking and also doing motherly things. However, her weaknesses can be stressing out too much when Phoebe can be away for so long. She even worries and maybe even tears up whenever Phoebe leaves, or even when she doesn't come back, and things get profoundly scary from there. But since in the recent years, Margaret has tried her best not to worry so much about Phoebe, but she still has a profound heart for her one and only daughter. And a fun fact about Margaret is that she was born on August 7th, 1954, which we discussed earlier, but August 7th was the first ever Friday in which Phoebe and Snow was created. Basically, the series was created. Basically, I had this idea. So basically, we had this idea since August 3rd, 2015, which was a Monday. So that makes August 7th a Friday. And I based it off of her to be August 7th because that was the first Friday, and that was basically the first Friday in which Phoebe and Snow had existed. And in fact, every Friday, the Furball family goes out. Maybe they either go out, have dinner at home, but the thing that they always do for a tradition on Friday is relaxing and enjoying a treat. It could be anything. I honestly don't know what she could be making right now. Anyway. And now, without further ado, please welcome Phoebe's mom, Margaret Furball. Margaret, how are you doing? Pretty good, she says. That's pretty good. Have you been keeping a close eye on Phoebe? Yeah, I have been, she says. That's amazing. You are a pretty good mother to her. Yes, I certainly am, she says. Well, take care. And now we're gonna move on to your husband. Oh, now he's gonna be in the spotlight. Ooh, that's gonna be amazing. Alright, Margaret, see you later. Now we come to the last character of the main series, and he's a very funny person. Anyway, his name is Jeff Furball, or Jeff Michael Furball. He is known for being the father of the one and only daughter, Phoebe Furball. He is also one of the 3 members of the Furball family. Margaret and Jeff officially got married in about 1976, and they had Phoebe towards the middle of January 1981. Jeff was even there all the way and watched Phoebe grow up. from being a little baby to now practically being half an adult of the age. One of his key aspects is that he's pretty funny, and I mean profoundly. He tries to shove in jokes anywhere he goes, except for when there's something serious happening like a funeral, but generally what he tries to do when things don't go his way, or when things are going tough, he tries to cheer everyone up, and he always has a smile, but it's always covered by his mustache. But even from his mustache, he's always still smiling, even though we can never really see a smile. Despite that, he still brings great joy to the Furball family and in his workstation. Jeff works at Stanley's Yarn Factory, which is a pretty big yarn factory in Catville. In fact, they actually have a mascot called Yarny the Yarn Ball. It's basically a pink ball with some knitting needles poking through him. So it's basically like that fits really well in Catville's culture. As well, the Yarn Factory also makes a bunch of other projects similar and basically in the brand of Yarny the Yarn Ball's name. They make things like toys and plushies and different colors, practically everything. It's one of the most versatile companies in Catville, and especially since yarn is pretty important in Catville, they need it to knit their clothes, and it's also good for crafts. It's definitely good for Phoebe herself too, as she absolutely loves the Yarn Factory and does it to make some knitting or even some crafts. Phoebe also likes to do a bunch of other crafts, but we'll get into that maybe sometime soon. But for now, the Yarn Factory is Jeff's favorite job. He goes in every day and walks in pretty happily. His boss, named Stanley, which is also the founder of Stanley's Yarn Factory, thinks that he's one of the best employees that he's ever met. He always says that he always brings a great smile on his face, and that itself, he said, cheers up everyone in the room. And I definitely agree with that myself. If you're more happy, then you're more likely to get a good reputation than someone who's not, or who's constantly negative all the time. Jeff himself is a very unique character. He's kind of one of the kind characters in Phoebe and Snow. He's also kind of a clown character. One of his favorite things to do is to watch movies, go to plays, and basically study comedy as you know it. He's been practicing for decades, as it's been his lifelong passion. In fact, one of his earliest career jobs, or one of his earliest career dreams, was going to be a clown, or at least being a jokester. Jeff tried pretty hard to push himself through, and he tested the limits of what he can do in comedy. He was primarily known for being a comedian in his high school years, from the late 60s to the mid 70s, basically from his high school career all the way to his late college career. Jeff himself was also a bit of an actor, and as I discussed earlier, he also liked plays too. He was kind of a theater person, but also an acting person too, which I guess they're the same things. He practically wanted to do anything in show business, but he decided, however, after failing to get even a job in that industry, he ultimately decided to work at a yarn factory because he liked the colors of the yarn. In fact, he actually uses his yarn. He actually uses yarn from the yarn factory and makes it into art projects, and basically from there he can make things that are incredibly worth lasting and stuff like that. There's a lot more about it. Some of Jeff's strengths include that he's incredibly funny, he's incredibly smart when it comes to humor, and he's also a bit emotional intelligence. He tries his best not to get into the way. And he's pretty kind, just like all the other characters, except for Brittany though. Some of his weaknesses include that sometimes he focuses too much on comedy, and sometimes he can get a little bit too off schedule, and a little bit too off the rails, meaning that he kind of sometimes can have a little bit trouble focusing. But in the recent years, he's been trying to work more on that. In fact, he's trying his very best not to let his comic get the best of him, but he still uses it nonetheless whenever he's appropriate. And another weakness about him is that he's also just as worried as Phoebe's mom is, Margaret. They basically serve as the loving couple to keep Phoebe safe. They're basically like Phoebe's angels. Anyway, I think we've talked a lot about Jeff now, so now let us introduce Jeff Burball. Alright, hi Jeff, how are you doing? Pretty good. That's good to hear, Jeff. So, did you enjoy the origin story? Yes, I did, said Jeff. That's good to hear. Tell me a joke. Sure. Why did the chicken cross the road? Why? Because it just did. It's a chicken. Oh yeah, that's funny. Anyway, well, goodbye, Jeff. And let's say goodbye to the audience, too. Alright, said Jeff. Alright, bye. Well, we have officially reached the end of our story, and now the end of our film. We hope that you enjoyed this picture as much as we did, and just as how much we love making it. We've had a lot of fun times, and I hope you enjoyed the origin story of how these two cats formed an unbreakable friendship, and how Catville was created. We got to learn the history of Catville a little bit, and most importantly, learn the development of the main characters. So I hope that you enjoyed this picture as much as I did making it. And I myself speaking am the narrator. I'm also the creator of the film. And my name is Caleb Burnett, so I made this film all by myself. And I hope that you take care of yourself, and yeah. Anyway, and now the film is officially over, and now the credits will roll.
Phoebe and Snow, Phoebe and Snow, Phoebe and Snow. Two cats ready to go, one's black, one's white. Phoebe and Snow, they never fight, they know what's right. They know what to do at the right time. They love to roll, roll and go, wherever they go. The bond they have will not let go. Phoebe and Snow, Phoebe and Snow, Phoebe and Snow. Phoebe, Phoebe, Phoebe and Snow. Phoebe and Snow, Phoebe and Snow, Phoebe and Snow. Two cats ready to go, one's black, one's white. Phoebe and Snow, they know what's right. They hope that their future together's bright. They love to play. They play together every single day, wherever they go. The bond they have will not let go. Phoebe and Snow, Phoebe and Snow, Phoebe and Snow, Phoebe, Phoebe, Phoebe and Snow.